Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, good, good. We're going to go ahead and get started. Want to be mindful of everyone's time. Really appreciate you being here. Uh, Man, Rio, we're in Rio, Brazil, right? Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's fascinating being here for a conference. So, I mean, we're all very fortunate, very blessed to be here. My name is Chris Upperman. I'm the head of global governance engagements and partnerships at Meta, Facebook, for those who are still a little less familiar with that. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to have a conversation today about navigating the digital landscape. We're going to be talking about content moderation. This is still a fascinatingly unfamiliar conversation a lot in our community. I think most people are familiar with when you post something on social media platforms, having your content flagged or your account blocked or something taken down. We're going to actually talk to one of the experts in this space, Professor Ronaldo Lemos, who is Brazilian. I'll let him do his bio and everything. But he is a part of the Oversight Board, which is the first of its kind digital Supreme Court. And we'll get into kind of more of the specifics around that. We want to give everybody an understanding of what the Oversight Board is and what our approach is. And I'll just start off by saying this, that, we had the great panel earlier today with Google. We have ourselves, we have other platforms. We're very large. We are companies that have kind of a grand impact. Our platform has somewhere north of 3.7 billion users globally across all of our family of apps. That is Facebook, the traditional blue. We have WhatsApp, we have Instagram, we have Oculus, we have a whole range of tools. Now we have Ray-Ban glasses and Quest 3 AR VR tools. But at the core of our platform, it is a platform that people are posting content, communicating with each other, and with that comes a lot of tricky dynamics because content can be whatever someone deems it to be. Conversations on politics, conversations on identity, conversations about sexual health, reproduction, conversations about violence, conversations that range the gamut. And so ultimately, who is going to hold the platforms to account as it relates to the contents that are on this platform? So we're in the governance organization. I have my two amazing colleagues here, Vale and Brittany, who are here with me, and they will also be speaking to you all over the course of the next couple of days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it over to Ronaldo, and then we'll just dive right into a conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for everyone for being here for this conversation. So my name is Ronaldo Lemos. I'm from Brazil, and I lived in Rio de Janeiro for 15 years. Now I live in São Paulo, which is not that far, but Rio has the beaches and everything. So I hope you have the time to enjoy a little bit the city. I have been working in this space that I can call it technology policy for about 25 years already. And in Brazil, I participated in building Brazil's internet law, which is, we call it locally Marco Civil, which is a pretty remarkable piece of legislation for two reasons. First, it's because it was collaborative, so it was built with the participation of the entire Brazilian society through online and offline consultations that actually took 5 years to happen. So it's a pretty singular effort in terms of how you approach internet regulation. And the second reason is it was a pretty progressive law in terms of rights enabling, looking forward to protection of data, transparency on the part of the government, and a lot of values that I think are extremely important even as today. So I joined Meta's Oversight Board around 3 years ago. For those of you who are not familiar with the Oversight Board, Chris just used the words digital Supreme Court, which I beg a little bit to disagree because it has a different role, but I would say an equally important one. And the Oversight Board was created by Meta as an independent organization. It has its own endowment fund that actually allows us to survive and operate independently. This independency, I think, it's important to be emphasized because that's what makes us make decisions that don't have to consider, for instance, shareholder maximization, and board members, they do have mandates. So I'm afraid I cannot be fired. So I hope I don't do anything wrong here, but that's an important topic regarding the independence of board members as well. And in my view, it's probably one of the most important institutional exercises that the world is actually doing in terms of how to regulate internet. I think the Oversight Board, of course, I'm a member of it, but it's a model that can be looked for regulating artificial intelligence, for regulating other companies. And actually, in these past 3 years, I think we have very good evidence that we have raised the bar so much in terms of accountability in regards to Meta. And we have a lot of evidence as part of our decisions. We have taken some really important ones that were really profoundly changing the way that we even talk about content moderation. So in my view, I think it's a very important model for us to discuss. Let me pause here, and then, of course, I'll be very happy to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing.
Certainly, and we're going to be doing this microphone tag here. I think it's actually really important to ground this conversation first so everyone has kind of a baseline understanding of what we're discussing here, because I'm going to kick this back over to Ronaldo to actually explain what the board is, what they do, and how they go about the business of the institution. But let me just start actually just from content moderation. Show of hands, how many people are familiar with what content moderation is? Okay, I'm going to call on somebody, actually, since everybody raised their hand. You raised your hand. No. Second row, what is content moderation? Yeah. That is a really great response, because that's exactly what it is. What people don't understand about a lot of these platforms are you post something like happy birthday, to a loved one, or I'm celebrating a new job or promotion or something. Once again, Wilson explained the idea of artificial intelligence and machine learning that's behind, and algorithms that have been pulled together to allow for this content to be seen. So when you open your phone, you see content and you think it's just as simple as like, I put the post button, I wrote something, and then it goes live. On the back end, there's actually a lot of sophisticated algorithms that have been woven together that allows for that content to be posted. You can understand, how complex that can actually get when you're talking about a lot of individuals. But at a platform of our size and at scale, that like what we have, that can get really tricky. Once again, when you start talking about very personal things, when you start talking about hot button political issues and things like this, we don't always get it right. Right? It is a new frontier for online creators and platforms to allow for this type of content globally to be posted. What does it look like in the Latin American diaspora? Like, what is, content in Portuguese like versus what's content in Spanish? What is content in continent of Africa, maybe sub-Saharan Africa, versus what content in Turkey or, Iraq look like? It's so different. Ultimately, we felt that it wasn't our place to make the decision centrally in Silicon Valley, a bunch of white men saying this is the type of content that should be on our platform for all types of diverse populations around the world. What we then decided was that we should come up with an independent body to actually look. Whoa, y'all awake now? Wow. We decided that there was a need for an institution to look at this content and make ultimate decisions on this so that we could actually be much more rigorous in the idea of the way that content should live on our platform or not. Then comes in the board. So at this point, I wanted to make sure that everyone had an understanding of content moderation. Thank you again. That's very succinct and accurate. But what goes into the content moderation is the idea that sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. There are posts, and I want actually Ronaldo to talk about this because one of the board's first case was actually from Brazil, the very first one. And so I think that's a good opportunity for you to share more about the board, what it does, and then even maybe the case, and to give people some of that example.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. So basically what the board does, it makes final decisions in regards to content moderation. I think we can all agree that the rule is always freedom of speech, but there are certain types of speech that when you look at human rights norms, which are basically the norms that we apply to make our decisions together with Meta's terms of use and community values and so on, there are certain forms of speech that fall outside of the freedom of speech protection. So for instance, incitement of violence. Sometimes speech can lead to harm, to violence. It can lead to discrimination of minorities. So there's a lot of types of speech that fall outside this rule of freedom of speech. So our job is basically to look into content issues and the cases that are appealed by the users. They can escalate to the board. And basically, we make a final decision whether the content should be left online or basically taken down. And these decisions, and I think this is the important part, are binding on Meta. So when Meta created the board, it agreed that the decisions that we make are basically must be immediately applied. So as you mentioned, our very first case came from Brazil. It was a case involved Instagram. Our jurisdiction is basically Facebook and Instagram. And in that particular case, it was a campaign that we called in Brazil Pink October. It's for awareness for fighting against breast cancer. It's a very important campaign, especially because Brazil has a universal healthcare system. So basically, you have the entire system engaged in that campaign. And a particular physician posted a picture of female breasts on Instagram, and those were taken down automatically through algorithmic moderation. So the case escalated to the board, and in our very first decision, we actually said, well, this is completely viable and desirable content. This is something that we should not be taken down. So we reinstated the content, and we also have the capability of making recommendations to Meta. The recommendations, they are not binding as our decisions, but Meta has the public responsibility to respond to our recommendations. And actually, in this past 3 years, we have around 100 recommendations that we have made to Meta. And I'm very happy to say that the absolute majority of those recommendations have actually been implemented by Meta. We have a special committee in the board that we keep tabs and we track the recommendations that we do, so we understand where they are, if they have been implemented, fully implemented, and so on, and we report on that. And it's great to see that actually the number of recommendations that Meta has been implemented is very high. And in that particular case, we recommended that the algorithms of Meta should improve to actually distinguish between types of nudity. In this case, it's a completely permissible kind of nudity. And that was actually effective. So when we see and we look to Brazil, the Pink October campaign never had problems anymore. It's going on and so on. So it's an important thing. And it's important also, just to conclude, Chris, that we are in the Diaspora Festival talking about these issues. And I am one of the 3 members from Latin America in the board. The board has 22 members. So it's me, it's Catalina Botero from Colombia, and Pamela San Martin from Mexico. So we are 3 Latin Americans, And the board has taken quite a few cases from Latin America. So we had cases in Colombia, in Peru, we had cases in Cuba, and Latin America is a very important region for the board. It's a priority region for all we do. And not only that, I think Latin America is also an inspiration for the board because it's a region in which you have a lot of participatory projects going on, and digital participatory projects. And this is one of the things that excite me the most, the fact that the region is being capable of producing so many initiatives that actually allow people to use technology for the sake of empowerment and of participation. So I think of projects like Ni Una a Menos in Peru, which have spread to different countries. I think about Brazil's role in inventing deliberative budget, participatory budgeting, which now is used for many other cities. And I think this is a huge example, especially because for the Oversight Board, participation is crucial.
Yeah.
Every decision that we make, we have a public comments, and we actually actively ask for participation from stakeholders. And as you said in the beginning, when you think about content moderation, context is everything.
It's critical.
So if we have a case in Colombia, you have to understand what's going on in Colombia.
Right.
You have to understand how Spanish is spoken in Colombia, what each and every word means, so that we can make an informed decision that can then help Meta scale that decision and apply it across its entire services. So it's an important task, a really hard one, I would say, but we were created to do that, and hearing from you and improving what we do in the next years, I think it's crucial for this issue.
I mean, he just covered pretty much everything that I wanted to discuss, and that's amazing.
That's a way of saying that I spoke too much.
No, it was actually really, I mean, I'm sitting back, as you know, Ronaldo and I from time to time go to different conferences. We'll be at South by Southwest in a number of weeks.
Yep.
And I sit back and just really appreciate this because, I joined the company to hold the company accountable. I said I was many years in public sector in government, and I joined Meta to really figure out ways that we can do things differently and to decentralize the voice of just Silicon Valley voices on a lot of our policies. So I'm really impressed by this, and I'm glad to see after 4 years of the establishment and implementation of where the board is and the way in which you guys feel. And I want you to expand a bit on what you just said. You shared that you have a board member from Colombia, you have a board member from Mexico, you yourself are from Brazil, and you talked about the importance of the diasporic intersection and the thinking that goes in this. With 22 global members, you have Indy, who is from Indonesia. You have Tawakal from the MENA, Middle East region. You have a whole set of very diverse individuals. Talk about what that's like balancing these global perspectives as you think about content moderation. Because once again, there's how we might think about things in the United States could be very, very different than how you think about things in Brazil. And now that you have a global panel of experts, Nobel laureates, academics, lawyers, legal scholars, you're a professor and a lawyer, how do you balance that with this group?
Oh, that's a good question. It's great to have global perspectives and actually different values as well, because it's important also to avoid what we can call group thinking or like a uniform thinking in a board like this. But the way we of course, we have disagreements internally, but one important thing is when we make a decision, sometimes you have a majority decision and a minority decision. So basically, the board members that actually disagree, they have the opportunity to basically say why they disagree with
almost
the
like
decision.
dissenting. They can dissent.
Yeah, they can dissent. And the dissent, I think it's very important because, as we know, content moderation, it's a subject that is complex. It moves all the time. So basically, it's important to have the possibility of different perspectives coming together to basically find what is the most possible consensus. And it's great to have those perspectives. As you mentioned, Tawa Call is a Nobel Prize winner, Peace Nobel Prize winner. You have Catherine from Taiwan as well, also
former regulator.
Bringing the Asian perspective. Also, we have like Sudhir from India as well. And this is so important, Chris, because think about it. This year, more than 40% of the people in the world will have elections. Right? And it's more than 60 different countries having elections in 2024. As you can all probably agree with me, if you're Brazilian, I'm sure you agree, elections can be very complicated nowadays. And they can be very hard to approach in terms of content moderation. So what we basically strive to do is to see these perspectives, like elections in India, elections in Brazil, elections in the US, and see how we can learn from each other's experience. Brazil just had elections like a little more than a year ago, and as you guys probably saw, that was a very convoluted process that even led to us copying the US to some extent in storming governmental buildings and that sort of things. So, of course, speech permeates all that, right? So we have to be very careful because we have to keep a level playing field for speech to happen, multiple perspectives to basically flourish. But we have to be very careful as well with what I mentioned, which is incitement, hate speech, and things that actually, instead of promoting freedom of speech, actually end up curbing freedom of speech because they if you are just a citizen that wants to participate in good faith, you must be, sometimes you are scared away if you see a violent speech taking over an election debate. So we have to be very careful with that. But with that said, I think like our strength is precisely to be a global board and to learn from each other, from each of the electoral experiences in individual countries, and use that knowledge in order to make the best decisions and to keep Meta accountable also in terms of how it approaches elections.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And I'm going to ask you maybe a couple of more questions, and I would love to open it up for any questions that anyone has in the audience so we can have a two-way conversation. But one thing that I want you to speak about is, we're on the stage together. I work for Meta. You're at the Independent Oversight Board, which truly is independent. It was established through a trust, irrevocable. We can't get those funds back. They hold us to account, binding authority, all these things. Very legitimate. However, there are still at times kind of this credibility conversation. This notion of, well, you are only holding Meta to account. The relationship that we have is a very symbiotic one, obviously, because you guys are looking at our content policies and the moderation policies. But talk a little bit more about the importance of that independence. And quite honestly, like how you dissented with me out the gate. When I said digital Supreme Court, you're like, I have to disagree there. I want people to know and talk about a little bit about these moments where we have disagreements as a company versus you all as an institution.
Well, I would say that we have a lot of disagreements, right? And that's very healthy in a sense. So the best way to think about that is actually to talk about the cases. So let me use some examples from Latin America because I think they are closer to the audience here. But for instance, we had a case regarding Cuba, and it was a women's organized protest that actually happened in Cuba about a year after COVID. And it was a moment of crisis, of insatisfaction with the government, of material hardships. And this protest basically posted a lot of content on Facebook. And Meta actually took it down. Based on its hate speech policy, because the women, they were very angry and they were using harsh terms, which is expectable in a situation like that. And then the case escalated to the Oversight Board. We worked with local constituencies in Cuba. we understood the context in which that language was being used, and we actually made a decision to actually restore that content back so that anyone could see it. So that was one case. The other case that I think might be interesting is in Colombia.
Yeah.
It was a protest against former President Ivan Duque, and they were also using slurs in order to refer to the president. And also, once again, the content was taken down. We looked into it. We understood the local context. We opened the consultations, received a lot of participation. And once again, we decided to restore that content online. So social media, it plays a very important role, especially in places in which you have the channels in which you would expect free speech or speech to happen not free. And so especially in those places, the board has to be very careful in analyzing content because the value of voice is absolutely important for a situation like that. So these were I think, a couple of examples in which we were like in different perspectives in what we do. And I'm sure, and I hope, and actually from the recommendations we have, I think those might have been helpful for Meta to think it's content moderation, to improve its content moderation, to look into context, understand what is actually going on the floor, because this is very important, like keeping and improving the idea of content moderation all the time, because every context is different.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the findings that we have in these points.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Yeah, any of the cases that deal with political leaders, the politics, or issues of protest get really tricky between the two of our institution, our organization and your institution. Because we look at very practical things like harm. And very literal, what will this do? To your point you're making around incitement. However, oftentimes what you all are saying is that your policies aren't clear. You all need to be a little more clear in your policies. And so we, really welcome when you guys say you actually have this in the right direction. You just need to be a bit more clear, and you need to clarify this for users so that there are those nuances as it pertains to specific types of content. Yep. Last question that I'll ask you, because I think it's actually an important one, and I'd just love to get your perspective, right? You're in year 4 and change as it relates to the board established, and you guys hold us to account, right? This was something that we felt very positively around a self-regulatory model. Now we're in a new kind of regulatory landscape globally, right? There's any number of geopolitical tensions that are going on and challenges. And we're also just looking at a different regulatory landscape than when we even were first thinking about the board. And now there are some places that are holding very large online platforms to account. How do you think, and you as a board member and the institution think about what more you would like to do to expand your scope, different companies, different online creating content platforms? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, basically, I think in the past 3 years, a little more than we have operated, I think we have proven that the model actually works to establish one independent organization.
You guys have been in Oxford, you guys have been in Harvard case studies. There's been very serious, you guys in case law.
True.
So,
Yeah, so it became something that it's not me saying, but you can look like the work of scholars like Evelyn Dweck and others that have analyzed the work of the Oversight Board. And basically what they say is, you guys have achieved a place in the global regulatory spot. And this is extremely important because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I work with technology policy for about 25 years. Many institutions have tried that. So on the part of the United Nations, you have the IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, which have been trying forever to build some sort of binding global regulatory entity or effort, and it has never succeeded. So there are so many institutions and initiatives that have tried that, and none of them actually succeeded. And then the Oversight Board comes at the initiative of Meta, basically establishes itself. our decisions are being quoted by local courts, are being quoted by scholars. So it's interesting how there was a sort of a demand for some institution that could look to these problems that are global from a global perspective. All you have right now are basically national initiatives. And of course, national initiatives, they are limited in terms of how their scope can actually deal with problems that sometimes transcend the limits of specific jurisdictions. So in other words, I think like thinking about the future and your question is, I think we will seek to expand our mandate, of course. Now we have the issue of AI. So AI has become central for the idea of content moderation. There's a lot of people that basically say AI will solve content moderation. Let's use AI to moderate content. And I think to some extent, yeah, that works. But the question is, who is going to moderate AI itself, right? So last year, I met with OpenAI's president, Sam Altman. He came to Rio, and he asked us to organize a meeting in our think tank with the Brazilian scientific community. And Altman basically is asking for an international entity to regulate AI. He compares it with a sort of the International Commission on Nuclear Energy. Right. And knowing this space, knowing IGF profoundly and participating in it for so many years, this is not going to happen. Like, this is not going to happen. You know, there's not going to be an organization created with China, with the United States, and to regulate AI as nuclear energy is regulated, right? So I would suggest that OpenAI looks into the oversight board model, because maybe this is the model that is viable. There's no other model right now. And actually, we cannot wait 10 years for actually making those decisions. Sure. We have to make this decision right here and right now. So in my view, I think the work that we do, it can serve as a sort of an example for other companies as well that can look into this binding regulatory work with people from different places, with different backgrounds, different values. And I think that might be the way to go, when you think about regulation. So maybe, if some Altman is watching this, look into the oversight board. I think that might be a good example.
No, I appreciate that. This is all very insightful. I learn so much every time that I listen to you and other board members talk about the board and its work. And so really, really pleased to see this. So what we want to do is open up for questions from the audience. Any question is welcome. Would love for you to ask Ronaldo directly, about the board, and obviously happy to answer any questions of Meta within my scope. And we'll go from there. So I see a couple of hands that went up like kind of straight away. I know Julia in particular, so I know she had her hand up itching to jump, and I'll start here in the front and then go over to here. So it's like here, 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 here. All right.
Yeah.
If the content is, looks okay, and it's that can happen. They can be very sneaky. So I'm just wondering how that works.
Yeah, Julia, this is a great question. As you can imagine, the task of content moderation in a world that is at war is very hard, right? So you have the Ukrainian situation, you have Israel and Palestinian situation. And of course, that generates a lot of issues, and we are not running away from those issues. So we do have a case regarding Ukraine. We do have expedited cases that we took in regards to Israel and Palestinian, precisely at the moment that the conflict was emerging. And I do encourage you to take a look at those cases, because, as you can imagine, they're very complex. And not only that, they are right on the spot of an ongoing developing situation in terms of how Meta should deal with speech in those very difficult contexts. But everything that you mentioned, I think it's absolutely valuable. And of course, we as the board, we are looking into that as well. Another way that we interact with Meta is through what we call public advisory, policy advisory opinions, that we call them PAO. And the PAOs, they look into specific broad issues that Meta has to deal with, and we suggest how Meta should go about them. So just to give you an example of PAO, one of them that we took is about personal data on Facebook. So a lot of people, they actually post their home address. People use personal data to do this thing that is called doxing, and basically revealing phone numbers and addresses of adversaries or opponents, political adversaries, so that they can be shamed or that sort of stuff. And we actually did a PAO for Meta precisely about those issues. And that's not the only one. I'm just mentioning one. But these points that you raise, they're really important for us because we try to identify what are the key issues and bring them, and when the case comes, we elaborate a PAO or something like that as well.
Yeah, sure. And Julie, also to that, I only wanted to share that within Meta, we have any number of functions that focus on these issues. When you talk about Russia, it's very public that Russia shut us off. Once the war started, for purposes of misinformation and disinformation, and we have a strategic response unit. We have elections policy kind of councils of sorts inside our company that are looking at these issues very much in real time. So it's highly complex stuff. Now, a big part of why we actually promote the Oversight Board is that, I myself come from the public sector. We have a number of people in our company and the policy organizations that do, yet a lot of the ultimate decisions are made in the, C-suite in Silicon Valley. And you could see that there's kind of perhaps sometimes a lacking of that nuance because they're technologists. They're people who are looking to innovate. And so this is a big part of what we bring as a governance organization to Meta, which is this idea of like there is a depth and rigor that needs to get to our policies to understand that it's not a one size fits all approach, which sometimes innovation companies like to take. It's easier to do it that way, and that's where we're really at this point in time. So I just wanted to provide that a little context as well. Next question.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Marcia Perry-Dix. I own Perry Media. I'm the largest advertising agency, Black-owned ad agency in Pennsylvania. Thank you. We do a lot of marketing and utilize Facebook and Meta. My question is, as the young lady mentioned earlier, she talked about Russia. We know that there's bad actors on Facebook. But and things happen in cycles, right? Trends. So the one that I'm seeing right now, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but how do we fix it from a business level? And it's the one where fake accounts are emailing us, DMing us, saying that there's a problem with our Facebook account. So if you're sharing an account, like I'm managing 10 accounts, and my clients are saying, Marcia, there's something wrong with our account. I'm like, no, this is fake. And it's a new cycle of bad trends. How are you handling that right now? And when the next cycle comes and getting ahead of it, of the trend of fake accounts and do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
no, it's a great
you.
question. And it can get very technical, and I'll just be kind of very concise with my response on this. We've notice that as the kind of direction towards kind of AI and generative AI and the way in which all of our platforms are looking at that, there is a prevalence of more hacking that's going on and that. So I at least just want to call out to say that we know this. This is something that we were paying very, very close attention to, and currently. Our content policy teams and a number of organizations they've almost SWAT teamed this inside the companies because this is becoming much more prevalent. And in particular, when we went to APAC, we went on a trip last year to Singapore, and we had representatives from Indonesia, from Taiwan, from India, who were all speaking in Australia, and not dissimilar, but kind of close to what you're talking about. Frauds and scams are really big in that region, and a lot of it stems from this same thing. Someone who is kind of positioning themselves as Facebook or a user, or this is your business partner, and I'm just trying to get access to the account and change things up, or like, oh, here's this new opportunity for this business deal or something, and then that results in a whole number of calamities. So I only, like I said, want to call out that we know that this is a kind of rising problem, and we have our best and brightest minds on this. And if, ironic enough, a gentleman on our team who looks at trends has actually flagged this for our C-suite and our global affairs president, Nick Clegg, to take a deeper look into kind of pull together some of the minds inside the company to tackle this. So I'll just at least say that to go there. I don't know where you want to add from the board side.
If I can add from the board side, one of the goals that we have is treating users fairly. So this is a very important issue. So a lot of people lose their accounts because of that. And actually, losing your account is a problem that we have looked into, because sometimes your account is suspended, or you simply lose access to it and you don't know what happened. And actually, we looked into that a couple of months ago, and as a result of that, Meta has already improved their system for punishing accounts. So now there is a strike system in which users are basically warned and let known what they did wrong that might lead to the suspension of the account. And that was a direct result of the board work, because before that, we realized that a lot of users, one day you go there and try to log into your account and there's no account, and you don't know what you did and why you lost it, and you don't know how to basically access the company in order to get it back. So this is an important issue, and it's something that we are on the look as well.
And actually, all these questions are great, but these questions are going to take that and share more
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this on?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. I'm wondering if you could both, there we go. I'm wondering if you can both speak more, not only through your roles, about an inherent tension, right, between individual collective rights, right, power, whether it's geopolitical, so it's a little bit of a triangle, power, geopolitical, or domestic, and Meta's business model. And the business model is more eyes, right? Not only through data, through advertising and everything. So I think there's a fascinating conversation, and I just love to hear from your individual roles. Just how do you balance that? What rubric do you use? What surfaces? Because at the end of the day, its business model is fundamentally dependent on eyeballs, right? On people seeing content, whatever it is. So I'm just curious, just how do you balance that? What do you do? What are those conversations like?
Yeah. I'll start with it. Yeah, this is a fascinating. I mean, we were actually talking about this at dinner or just over drinks last night. And bear with me, because I'm going to kind of take you on a little bit of a journey. I prior to joining Meta, was a CEO of a multinational nonprofit out of a family office that supported startups in Greece and in the United States. And then prior to that, I was in small business policy during the Obama administration at the SBA. And so I come from a lens of thinking about business and entrepreneurship, and then the kind of policies that promote that. And I think this is just a fundamental thing that people don't focus on enough. I think people say it, but at the end of the day, Meta is a business. It's a private, publicly traded company, right? Globally speaking, but it is a business. Advertising drives our revenue. I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth on this, but about 98% of our revenue, it's 95 to 98% over the last number of years, have been from advertisement and the revenue that's generated from that. So it's very, very important to us. I'm going to give you just like a very simplistic response to this. The governance organization did not exist 5 years ago. That organization in Meta that now says we need to decentralize the user voice. So Mark Zuckerberg, you're not the only person. First off, he acknowledged it. Like, he's like, whoa, I do not want to be this singular force. I don't want to be this villain that a lot of people think he is, that kind of makes these mandated policies that then it will stick for the world. I mean, think about the pressure and also the liability of that. And then you have other figures who come in the company and say, yeah, we should get a little more serious about that. I think we're now maybe year 6.5, almost 7 years. I might be off by a year or so of having our global affairs president, Nick Clegg. He's the former UK deputy prime minister. I mean, this is the equivalent of a vice president or a president of a nation who works in this technology company, because a platform of scale such as ours touches so many lives in all of these very kind of nuanced and intersectional ways. So this is very unprecedented. You don't find like a politician of that level that usually comes into a tech company, but understanding that our platform has that impact on society, we knew we needed that rigor. Then you go from there, and how does he build out his organization? What are the functions? He has oversight of governance. It's like weird with the audios keep going in and out. He has the governance organization. He has comms. He has I would say kind of legislative affairs, but it's like external affairs and a number of other functions that are underneath him. And there's a continual outgrowth of content policy and the content policy teams. So I want to share with you that the reason why these teams exist are for this very notion, which is fundamentally a business would just think about business and like the revenue and the impact that it has in that way. But there's just much more depth that's necessary. And it's a constant tension. I mean, I could go on forever talking about the actual internal war. I had just started the company when the Oversight Board was announcing 2 weeks after my start date in the beginning of April, beginning of 2020. And it was a hard-fought battle. There was a global consultation period that went around the entire world, sat down. There was like 22 workshops, thousands of people that they engaged, civil society leaders, so forth and so on. Then they brought that back inside. And now you have people who, for any number of reasons, right? Like their scope in their organization might be singularly what was the decision maker. And now you're saying you want to bring in an outside group of experts. You can imagine where that individual or groups of individuals might initially think. They might be like, no, we got this. We can, give us more headcount, give us more people to do our job, give us more budget. These are the kind of conversations that go on daily in our company. And this is why me, in particular, as global engagement head, I'm really driven by the idea we need to show up. We need to be in these global fora. People need to know that we exist as a team inside Meta, because otherwise it's just everywhere I go, Mark Zuckerberg, like, and that's obviously obvious for the reasons that it is, but there's really serious work that's going on in our company and very, very serious people who have done any number of amazing things, set internet policy, who have set small business policy, who have set human rights and national security policy that work inside our company. So it may not directly answer your question, but I just want to tell you that we bring that kind of thinking and rigor inside our company.
Just to follow up on that, it's interesting because this is one difference between the Oversight Board and Meta, which is fundamental, which is when we make decisions, we don't look into that. We don't look whether we are missing eyeballs or if this content, we don't care if it's going to be popular or not.
This is attention.
This
is where it's like, we're like, our leaders are like, this is a business. You understand that some of these decisions will have impact on scale.
Yeah, and this is important because it shows that this type of model, it looks the other way. Because if the decisions have to be taken only inside the company, the incentives are very large in order to go only to maximize eyeballs or profit and so on. Same will happen with AI, right? So there's a lot of talk right now about how to approach AI. And it's the same. Like if you only look into the issue from the business perspective, that can create a lot of problems down the line, right? So I think this is one of the key reasons for the Oversight Board to exist. And actually, it's precisely that allows us to look into Meta and say, look, this is not the way to go. You have to take into account all these other values, human rights, frameworks, safety, and other issues. So I think this is the point, and that's why I think from the institutional perspective, and this is something that interests me personally, because I think the world that we live today requires a lot of institutional imagination, because we have problems that are completely new, and the institutions that we have to deal with them are basically built in the 20th century or even in the 19th century. So one of the things that we need to be capable of is to create new institutions that can actually deal with these new types of problems. And I think that's a great thing that Meta did. Like Meta took the risk of doing this experiment, because in the beginning it was just an experiment. And looking back now, we're heading to our 4th year. I think the experiment proved itself. I think it worked. And as I said, probably it's going to be one of the very few paths that actually will effectively work for global issues like AI and others.
Yeah, just one
I
question.
think we're first. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me? I guess. So yeah, first of all, thank you for the panel and exposition. Yeah, I'm trying, but. Mano, acho que tá sem som.
Hello.
But yeah, I can try it on my own voice. I can try on my own voice. But first of all, thank you for the panel. And we have some new cases in Brazil. I know Brazil. I'm Brazilian too, so we know that Brazil have a lot of think tank about fraud and something like that. You have a new case in Brazil. It's called Jogo do Tigrinho. There's like little tiger game. Just explain for everybody. It's kind of 100% scheme, online casinos that take people's money. And my question is about how to regulate that, because it's basically just like one of the things that I'm most impressed at, that people take Neymar's picture and start making Neymar and make AI rephrase the Neymar's voice to send this kind of issue. And just asking how do you think that we can address this kind of regulation, basically not just on AI, but in this case that's not just violent speech, but it's fraud too. So thank you.
It's a really great question, and I want Ronaldo to actually talk about this, because we recently had a case, the Biden case, very similar to this, because what you're actually talking about is kind of digital altered media, and this I think is a really big frontier. You're talking about two things. You're talking about, in ways, what I was getting into, kind of the frauds and scams and kind of the marketplace and money and the way in which people can be scammed on these platforms. So I think there's ways we could talk about that. But then, in addition to your point, which we're familiar with, where people will superimpose or digital altered media of a big figure, Neymar in particular here, who people are going to follow, and they'll say, here, you put your money here, and you get this amount of money back, or you get this type of coupon that'll give you access to a casino, or just various things that I'm familiar with. So I only wanted to recently bring up a case that that the board came back to us on a political figure in America, our President Biden, where it was his granddaughter in the photo that he was actually touching the shoulder of, but people took it, altered the media to make it look like he was inappropriately touching a young woman, and then they said that, like, look at this sexual predator, and in fact he was talking to his granddaughter and also putting a I voted sticker on her from an old photo that then was applied in that way. So I'd love for Ronaldo to actually talk about that.
Yeah. And the decision that we took is we made a recommendation to Meta that they should label the pictures that are actually created with AI, so that people can actually know that they're seeing a content that is not the true, right? So for the Jogo do Tigrinho, I think every Brazilian know about that. They're doing that quite a lot. They use like Luciano Huck, Neymar, and Brazilian celebrities in order to push this scheme, for Brazilians. So under the policy recommendation that we did, Meta ought to basically label the content as being altered by AI or whatever. And the next day of our decision, Meta actually announced that they are going to do just that. So they are going to give people the labels so that they know that a particular content has been altered using AI and other techniques. And once again, this case is very recent. It's probably one of the first cases we took about AI. And actually, I'm very happy with that case, because there's been a lot of debate about what to do with AI. And I think we took like a small step It's a first step that actually points in the direction that we should do something about it, at least to give information for people when AI is used.
We have time for one more question. Right here.
Yeah, just want to ask a little bit about your vision of the future, because you've painted a very hopeful scenario here with two different cultures that are in some tension with one another. But of course, it's a product of a particular moment when Meta was under a particular kind of public criticism, which generated the Oversight board. But of course, Meta's not the only player in town. As you've mentioned several times, you've mentioned AI, OpenAI, there's Twitter, TikTok. So, it might be that what you're describing is a product of that particular moment. So what's the future look like? Is it a hopeful one like the one you described? Less hopeful?
Well, we Brazilians, we are optimists, right? I would describe myself as a cautious optimist. I think like things will go well in the end, but it will require a lot of work. So it's not that they will go well on their own. We will have to work for that to happen, and a lot. And in the case of the Oversight board model, I think it really became something of note for platforms. So I already see other companies going into the same direction. So in India, you have a social network that is very popular called Koo, Koo, and they're basically creating their similar to the Oversight board. Spotify has created its safety advisory council as well. Even Elon Musk has said that there should be some form of independent regulatory body to do. Yeah, I'm not sure if he remembers that, but he actually said that some time ago. And TikTok is looking into advisory council as well. So I think slowly, when other companies will look around, they might look to the Oversight board and say, oh, this is actually working. And it provides a path to deal with a very complex issue. And one thing that I think it's important to conclude is content moderation is extremely important. If you let it go, you lose the product. So content moderation is part of the product, I always remember platforms that basically at some point in their existence abandoned content moderation. So one example is Tumblr. So Tumblr was great. I used it a lot. And then it was completely overtaken by violence, pornography, and I don't think anyone uses Tumblr right now.
Because they came on the back end to take it off. But everybody had fled the platform at that point.
And if Meta one day wakes up and say, okay, so forget about content moderation, I think something similar would take place, as we see to some extent happening on Twitter, X right now. The X came up with something that I find interesting, which are the community notes that I think are working to some extent, but they can be easily gamed. So it's very easy to create fake community notes. And will there be a community node on a community node? I don't know. But the point is, I think we have proved that there is a viable and effective model. And slowly I can see that other companies are taking note of that as well.
Well, Ronaldo, thank you so much. Obrigado. We just really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you.